all of these players, and now it turns out they only have a fraction of it. Are they profitable? Oh yeah, wildly so. Well, then who cares? Anyway.
Yeah. I have like a lot of ideas, so sorry if I go a little long on this one.
Please go ahead.
There's like 6 things to say, and I hope I really do not come across to start with as expressing that if people are being critical, they're wrong or silly or something. I think there's a lot of justifiable critiques from a lot of different levels, but I think one thing is part of this. This is the first patch cycle that a lot of people who came in during the WoW Exodus and the end tail of Shadowbringers are really all completely caught up and experiencing a full patch cycle. On top of that, the 6.x patch cycle was a distinct entity unto itself, whereas the 7.x is back to the like Stormblood, Shadowbringers, Heaven's Word, 0.1 through 0.3 is an epilogue, and 0.4 through 0.5 is, set up. And that's the story alone, but that also kind of affects how the patches feel.
Yeah.
On top of that, people always, a huge amount of people always take an enormous break either between patches or once the 0.0 comes out until the next expansion's coming out. They don't do any of the patches.
Till the 0.55 or something like that. Yeah. And they're like, yeah.
Nothing that's happening right now, nothing at all is abnormal or out of like what the expected delta of change would be, to be frank. So any like doomsaying is just wrong. Now, they're not wrong to be critical of the fact that there's not preeminent content that's repeatable in the 0.1 patches. That's not having cosmic explorations, cult crescent, any of that. So a bunch of stuff that people can do. That is a problem. People are not wrong that Dawn Trail itself is somewhat divisive in terms of like having people not liking the story for X or Y reason. I think a lot of the reasons sometimes people give are, I don't connect with it, so this thing's the reason why. And I think a lot of times they're misattributing the problem, but that's its own conversation. I think there are some justifiable criticisms, but I also think that part of it is like you repeatedly get to 6.0 is the end of the first arc of the story. Arguably, there's a really strong argument to be made that 7.0 is effectively Final Fantasy 14 2. Mm-hmm. That's obviously a little bit incorrect, but it's the sentiment I think helps frame it a little bit better. I think within the looking at, we're setting our first footsteps towards a new arc, not only from a narrative standpoint, but from like trying to make, they're making a lot of good choices. Now, a lot of the choices are not paying off in the short term, or maybe even the medium term. I think a lot of the choices they're making are kind of hampering them in those ways. And I think a lot of people are frustrated with that because there has not been enough short-term thinking in some ways for 14. It feels like at times. And I think the people who particularly are experiencing their now maybe second or at most third year with the game, particularly like second year of the game, are now experiencing the frustration of this game's incredibly consistent and I want it to instead surprise me. Again, I don't want to boil anything down to just any of these metrics, but it's having played now for 5 or 6 years, I'm seeing a trend line that is not just in their development, but in the player base that it has repeated. I think it's particularly noisy this time, and I think a part of that goes back to the amount of people the amount of people and the amount of who joined in around COVID times, and particularly the people who were coming from other games with different expectations. It's not that simple, but I think that's an element.